Good morning, everybody. My kids are being quiet doing their math at the table. We'll see how long that lasts. And I got some things on my mind because I was talking with a friend last night who she's already homeschooling her daughter in kindergarten, and she just visited last week a classical conversations community. And she says she's about 98, 99% sure she's going to sign up and do CC, but she just wants to take some time and make sure it's not an impulse decision. And her question to me was, it seems like there's a lot of time memorizing a lot of quick facts and you just move on. Next week you memorize something else and the next week it's something else. And you never stop and study, in 1620 the pilgrims, okay, hold on, let's talk about the pilgrims, let's study the pilgrims. Okay, and she's totally right, we do. Every week in Foundations program, you introduce 7 new subjects, and in your community day, once a week, you'll all get together in class and your tutor will introduce 7 new subjects, and you're going to memorize a snippet for each of those subjects. And next week, it'll be a different 7, and next week, a different 7. And you can go home as mom. CC always acknowledges mom and supports mom or parents as the teachers. The CC tutor is just there to assist and to model things that you can do at home. But number 1, they always acknowledge the parent as being in total charge of the curriculum and the education and all that. And so number 1, if the parent does want to, we're going to stop and study pilgrims this week. We're going to study pilgrims for 6 months. Number 1, you are totally free to do that. But secondly, classical education is, the whole point of it is, centuries ago, they did know the best way to educate a child. How do children learn? How do our brains, like I'm calling myself a child, how did children's brains develop, And they had that all figured out. I remember when I was a child, getting up in the morning, getting ready to catch the school bus, and I'd hear the news playing in the background on the TV. Education is really low. We need more money for education. And 70% of our tax dollars go for education. And I'm going, they still don't have this figured out? It's 19 whatever, and we don't have this figured out. Okay, well, they did have it figured out. And it goes against what many of us would think today. Like when I started homeschooling, I knew I don't want to be one of these moms who does 4 hours of nature walks and calls that school, or laundry, or cooking. Well, that's math, and it is. But I had this concept and I didn't want to do that. I want academics, right? We're going to do math and science. Okay, but when it comes down to reality and you sit down with your kindergartner, you're not going to be working a bunch of math problems. Even if you have the best math book in the world and you sit down to do your math problems, well, you have to learn to write first. Honey, I can't read your numbers. Let's start at the beginning, okay? So there are things you have to go through before you can get to doing your math and your science and all these really in-depth academic problems, right? And number 1, you have to let them grow up and let their brains develop to be able to handle all this information and to come up with an answer. So in ancient times, what they did, you don't wait around for your kid to grow up before you try and teach them anything, because you have to wait till their brain can handle it. And then, no, you don't waste this time. While they're young, what do they like to do? You show them a movie and they have it memorized. They like to run around and sing silly songs over and over and over again, and rhymes and this and that, noises. They really like noises. Okay, so what classical education does is it teaches children, it takes advantage of the fact that when they're young, this is what they like to do. And this is what they're really good at. And so, yeah, we'll learn a song on this, and we'll learn a dance on that, and we'll learn some silly motions to this, and we'll act like chickens to remember the irregular verb forms of, chicky chicky do that. Okay, of your verb tenses. And it's just fun, and the moms enjoy it, and the kids enjoy it, and they're really good at it. And if you want to go home and study whatever subject it was, you're totally free to do that. But that's not really the point. The point is, like the alphabet, You know, you teach your kid that when they're 2 and they can sing it and it's cute. Do they understand it? Do they know how to write those letters? Do they know the sounds that they make and how they form together into words and sentences and thoughts and arguments? Do they? No. They just memorize it. But when they grow up, it will serve them for the rest of their life, you know, if we ever have the opportunity to look something up in alphabetical order. It's just a tool that they have with them. They don't have to Google it or ask their phone. And that's what we do. We take advantage of these years and put all that information in their head, like the elements of the periodic table. Do they need to understand elements? Do you understand elements? Do I understand elements? There's always more to understand about any one of these subjects. And we don't have to dump it on our children when they're 5. You know, but what they can do and what they can excel at and enjoy, memorize them. What are they? Hydrogen, helium, lithium, beryllium, boron, carbon, nitrogen. You know, the whole thing. Just memorize it. Classical Conversations does it. Give me the first 12 elements by element number and mass. And 1 hydrogen, H1, 2 helium, He4, 3 lithium, Li7, etc. Okay? Just put that stuff in your head. And looking back over my life, when I got to college chemistry class, you know, you walk into the big auditorium and up front is the wall of the periodic table of the elements. You know, sure, I had chemistry in high school, but even then, how much more comfortable would I have been with the whole subject of chemistry had I already known the periodic table? Iron is the 26th element. Yeah, I know that already. I can sing the whole song. It's just in my head like the alphabet. You know, and there's so many things we can put in our head like that. And also when you get it in your head, your brain can start to work on it. You know, maybe not today or tomorrow, but over time. And then one of these days you're going to wake up and go, wow, your brain is going to, because it works all the time when we're not paying attention. Okay, so that's what classical education does. It gets these things into their head. It takes really good use, makes really good use of this time when they're young and developing that skill. So that later on, when their brains are a little more developed and they can start to understand, the information's already there and they can put the facts together and see how they relate to each other. Okay, and the best example I have of this was we had done CC for several years, and then like over the next year my daughter learned to read. And so it was like a year later, right? She's going through my bookshelf looking for another book to read. So she looks at this book, this book, this book, this book, and then she says, "Oh, Mommy, Martin Luther." She found a book on Martin Luther. She said, "Is this the same Martin Luther who, in 1517, Martin Luther began the Protestant Reformation, and later John," let's see, I can't remember it. 1517, Martin Luther began the Protestant Reformation, which made John, later John, I gotta pause my video because I can't remember the song. Made Pope Leo X excommunicate him, later John Calvin joined the Reformation. This is how it all began. Man, she sang it all together fluently. Spoke it, she didn't sing it. Is that the same Martin Luther? Yes, that's the same Martin Luther. And that's the point. I just ruined my illustration because I couldn't remember the whole thing verbatim, just on the fly like she did. And usually I can. But anyway, the point is, she skipped over every other book on my bookshelf. But when she came to Martin Luther, it was familiar to her. It wasn't familiar like I've heard that name somewhere. It's like familiar and I know who he was and what he did and when, you know? And the next time she comes across that name, you know, I know who he was and what he did and when, and I know that we have a book on him in the kitchen, you know? And so what this Foundations program does, it makes a ton of things familiar to them. So then when they see it again, they'll recognize it and they'll have a basis, you know, on which to put that. Because she didn't pick out any other book on my bookshelf. And she didn't pick it up and read it. But I mean, she was 6. What kid wants to read a book on Martin Luther when they're 6? Yeah, so not bad, huh? So that is the point, I think. Sorry I ruined my illustration. And is there anything else that I need to say about that? Yeah. And that's the Foundations program in Classical Conversations. You'll do cycle 1 year, and the next year cycle 2, and the next year cycle 3, and then they're going to repeat it, cycle 1, cycle 2, and cycle 3. So the first time they go through it, there may be 4. When they see that same material again, they're going to be, a few years older. And so they're going through the same material, but next time around, they're going to understand it even more. And as you go, especially when they get older, now they're writing papers, now they're reading books, and now you can have those discussions on who are these people, and you can pick your topics. What do you want to dive into? It just lays the foundation, so there's information there, and that is delivering. A good place to stop. Okay, thanks for listening. I'm proud of you for homeschooling your kids, and just have a great homeschool day.